I'm excited to welcome you to my channel. Before I dive into my story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It was a chilly Saturday morning in late September when my phone buzzed, pulling me out of the warmth of my bed. I reached over, squinting at the screen, and saw it was Mike calling. Mike and I went way back to our college days, where he was always the outdoorsy type, dragging me along on hikes and camping trips. His voice was electric with excitement as soon as I answered. "Jake, you still asleep? Get up, man. The king salmon are running on the Salmon River up in Pulaski. It's prime time, and I think it's about time you caught your first fish. What do you say?" I rolled over, groaning, but a part of me couldn't help but be intrigued. Mike had been trying to get me to go on one of his fishing trips for years. I'd always found a reason not to, too busy with work, not interested in fishing, or just plain lazy. But something in his voice that morning made me pause. Maybe it was the thought of escaping the city for a bit, breathing in some fresh air, or maybe I just missed hanging out with Mike. Whatever it was, I found myself saying, "You know what? Let's do it. I'm in." Within an hour, Mike's old pickup truck was parked outside my apartment. As I climbed in, I saw the back was loaded with fishing gear, rods, reels, tackle boxes, and a cooler. Mike had a wide grin on his face as he revved the engine. "You're gonna love this, Jake. There's nothing like hooking into a big king salmon. Trust me." As we pulled away, I looked out at the city disappearing in the rearview mirror, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I wasn't much of an angler, and I had no idea what to expect. But Mike's enthusiasm was infectious, and I couldn't help but feel a little excited myself. After all, how hard could fishing be? We hit the highway heading north out of Syracuse, with the sun just beginning to climb above the horizon. The landscape gradually transformed from urban sprawl to rolling hills covered in trees, their leaves just starting to turn vibrant shades of red, orange, and yellow. Fall in upstate New York was something else, like a painting come to life. The crisp air carried a hint of winter, making it the perfect weather for an adventure. Mike was in his element, talking nonstop about past fishing trips as we cruised along. "You should have seen the one that got away last year," he said, his eyes lighting up with the memory. "Had to be at least 30 pounds. Fought it for a good half hour before it snapped the line. That's why I switched to heavier gear this season." I listened, half amused, half impressed. Mike was the kind of guy who could make anything sound exciting. He spoke of wild encounters with bears, days spent in remote parts of the Adirondacks, and early mornings on the river where the mist was so thick you could barely see your hand in front of your face. To Mike, fishing wasn't just a pastime, it was an adventure, a way to connect with nature and test himself against the elements. As the miles rolled by, I found myself getting more and more caught up in his stories. It wasn't just the fish or the challenge that appealed to him, it was the whole experience. I started to understand why he loved it so much. There was a simplicity to it, a break from the fast-paced, technology-driven world we lived in. Out there on the river, it was just you, your gear, and the fish, nothing else mattered. By the time we reached Pulaski, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the road. We turned onto a dirt path that led into the woods, the truck bouncing along the rough terrain. I could hear the rush of water in the distance, and Mike's excitement was palpable. "We're here," he said, pulling up to a small clearing by the river. "This is where the magic happens." We stepped out of the truck and into the clearing, where the Salmon River flowed just a few yards away. The sound of the water was soothing, a constant murmur that filled the cool evening air. I took a deep breath, the crispness of the air invigorating. The landscape around us was beautiful, a mix of tall pines and hardwoods, their leaves a riot of autumn colors. The sky was beginning to darken, streaked with shades of purple and orange as the sun set behind the trees. There were a few other anglers scattered along the riverbank, their figures silhouetted against the fading light. Some were waist-deep in the water, casting their lines with practiced ease. Mike pointed out a spot a little further downstream. "That's where we'll set up. The kings like to hold up in that deep pool over there." We unloaded the truck, grabbing our gear and making our way to the spot Mike had indicated. He handed me a rod, a sturdy-looking thing that felt heavier than I expected. "This is your weapon for tomorrow," he said with a grin. "We're going after big fish, so you need something that can handle the fight." I nodded, a little overwhelmed by the amount of equipment Mike had brought. There were tackle boxes filled with lures, hooks, and other mysterious fishing paraphernalia. Mike explained the basics as we set up camp, how to rig the line, how to tie knots, and the importance of keeping the line tight when you had a fish on. It was a lot to take in, but Mike was patient, walking me through each step. As we worked, the last light of day faded, and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky. The temperature dropped quickly, and I was glad for the campfire Mike soon built. We sat by the fire, warming our hands and sipping hot coffee from a thermos. The flames crackled, sending sparks up into the night, and the river's gentle murmur provided a soothing backdrop. Mike leaned back, staring up at the stars. "Tomorrow, we'll hit the river at first light. That's when the salmon are most active. Trust me, Jake, once you hook into one of these kings, you'll be hooked too." I smiled, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. I still wasn't sure I was cut out for this, but there was something about being out here, away from everything, that made me feel like I was in the right place. Tomorrow would be my first real fishing experience, and I had a feeling it was going to be unforgettable. I was jolted awake before dawn by the unmistakable aroma of fresh coffee and the gentle crackling of a fire. For a moment, I lay there in my sleeping bag, taking in the sounds of the early morning, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant hoot of an owl, and the constant, calming flow of the river nearby. It was a far cry from the noise and chaos of the city. I stretched, shaking off the last remnants of sleep, and crawled out of my tent. Mike was already up and moving around the camp like a seasoned pro. He greeted me with a steaming cup of coffee, his breath visible in the cool morning air. "Rise and shine, Jake. The fish are waiting for us." His enthusiasm was contagious, and despite the early hour, I found myself wide awake and eager to get started. We quickly ate a simple breakfast of granola bars and fruit, not wanting to waste any time. Mike had already prepped the gear, and after a quick check of the rods and reels, we were ready to go. I could feel a sense of anticipation building in the air as we made our way down to the riverbank, the sky just beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. The scene that greeted us was nothing short of breathtaking. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange, and a light mist hovered over the water, giving the river an ethereal, almost otherworldly quality. The world felt hushed and still, as if holding its breath in anticipation of the day to come. I took a deep breath, the crisp air filling my lungs, and felt a surge of excitement. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. Mike led the way to the spot we had scouted the night before, a deep pool where the salmon were known to congregate. He handed me my rod and gave me a few last-minute pointers. "Remember, it's all about patience. Cast out, let the line drift with the current, and keep an eye on that tip. When you feel a bite, don't jerk the rod, just reel in slowly and keep the line tight. The fish will do the rest." I nodded, trying to absorb his advice while also fighting the nervous flutter in my stomach. Fishing seemed so simple in theory, but standing there with the rod in my hand, about to make my first cast, I felt anything but confident. Still, there was no turning back now. I took a deep breath, focused on the water in front of me, and cast the line. The lure sailed through the air, landing with a soft plop on the water's surface. I watched as the current began to carry it downstream, the line unspooling smoothly from the reel. For a moment, I was struck by the peacefulness of it all, the gentle flow of the river, the quiet rustle of the trees, and the first rays of sunlight breaking over the horizon. It was a perfect morning, and for the first time, I understood why Mike loved this so much. Standing at the river's edge, I watched the water flow past, the surface rippling with the current. The sky had lightened to a pale blue, with streaks of pink and gold still lingering from the sunrise. There was a chill in the air, but I hardly noticed it, too focused on the task at hand. Mike had just demonstrated the perfect cast, his line soaring through the air before landing gracefully on the water, and now it was my turn. I gripped the rod a little tighter, feeling the weight of it in my hands. It was surprisingly heavy, with a sturdy, reassuring feel. I took a deep breath and tried to remember everything Mike had told me. It wasn't just about strength, it was about timing and finesse. I raised the rod, flicked my wrist, and sent the line sailing out into the river. To my surprise, the cast was pretty good, not as smooth or as far as Mike's, but respectable for a first try. The lure landed in the water with a small splash and began to drift with the current. I watched it intently, my eyes fixed on the tip of the rod, waiting for any sign of movement. My heart was pounding, a mix of excitement and nerves. I knew this was just the beginning, but already I was hooked, literally and figuratively. For the next hour, we fished in near silence, the only sounds being the gentle rush of the river and the occasional call of a bird. It was peaceful, almost meditative. The rhythmic motion of casting and reeling, the focus on the line, and the anticipation of a bite created a kind of zen-like state. I found myself getting lost in the moment, forgetting about everything else. It was just me, the river, and the possibility of that first catch. Mike was a few yards downstream, casting and reeling with practiced ease. Every so often, he'd glance over and give me a thumbs up or offer a word of encouragement. "You're doing great, Jake. Just keep at it." His presence was comforting, a steady guide in this new experience. But as the minutes ticked by without a bite, doubt began to creep in. Was I doing something wrong? Was my technique off? I tried to stay patient, reminding myself that fishing was as much about waiting as it was about catching. Still, it was hard not to feel a little discouraged. Mike had told me stories of people fishing all day without so much as a nibble, but I hadn't really understood what that felt like until now. Just as I was starting to think that maybe fishing wasn't for me, I felt a sudden, sharp tug on the line. My heart leaped into my throat. There it was, a bite. I almost froze, not sure what to do next. My mind raced with everything Mike had told me. Keep the rod tip up, don't jerk the line, reel in slowly. I tightened my grip on the rod and tried to stay calm, my hands trembling with excitement. In that split second, everything changed. The sudden, powerful tug on the line sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. My heart was racing, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "Mike! I think I've got something," I shouted, my voice a mix of excitement and panic. I glanced over at him, and he was already moving toward me, a grin spreading across his face. "Easy, Jake. Keep the rod tip up, and don't let the line go slack." Mike's voice was steady, but I could hear the excitement in it. He was beside me in seconds, watching intently as I tried to control the rod. The fish on the other end was powerful, and it was all I could do to hold on as it pulled the line taut. The real word as the fish took off downstream, and I felt the rod bend under the weight. For a moment, I was frozen, overwhelmed by the intensity of the situation. This was nothing like I had imagined. The fish was strong, much stronger than I expected, and it was fighting hard to escape. My arms ached as I tried to keep the rod steady, my knuckles white from gripping it so tightly. I could feel the fish pulling against the line, the vibrations traveling up through the rod and into my hands. "Don't fight it too much," Mike advised, his voice calm but firm. "Let it run if it needs to. Just keep the pressure on and reel in when you can." His words were like a lifeline, anchoring me in the moment. I nodded, trying to focus on what he was saying instead of the frantic pounding of my heart. The fish darted back and forth, trying to shake the hook, but I held firm. I could feel its every movement through the rod, the sudden jerks, the powerful surges, the way it changed direction in a desperate attempt to break free. This was a battle of wills, and I was determined not to lose. My arms were burning, my hands slick with sweat, but I refused to let go. Mike was right there beside me, coaching me through every move. "You're doing great, Jake. Just stay calm and keep reeling in when you can." His confidence in me was reassuring, giving me the strength to keep going. I tried to mirror his calm demeanor, but inside I was anything but calm. This was a rush unlike anything I'd ever experienced, part fear, part exhilaration, and part disbelief that I was actually doing this. The fight went on for what felt like forever, though in reality, it was probably only a few minutes. The fish was relentless, and there were moments when I thought for sure it was going to break the line or rip the rod out of my hands. But slowly, inch by inch, I began to gain the upper hand. I could feel the fish tiring, its powerful runs becoming shorter and less frantic. My arms ached, and my hands were shaking, but I kept reeling, determined to see this through to the end. The fight between man and fish intensified as the king salmon realized it was hooked. With every surge of power, the fish pulled line from the reel, making the drag sing a high-pitched whine. My entire body was tense, every muscle engaged as I tried to keep control. The fish seemed to be everywhere at once, darting left, then right, making powerful runs downstream, and occasionally leaping from the water in a display of raw strength. Each time it leaped, my heart skipped a beat, knowing that one wrong move could snap the line and end the battle in an instant. Mike stayed close, watching intently but letting me handle the rod. "You're doing great, Jake. Just let it tire itself out. Don't rush it," he called out. His calm, encouraging words kept me grounded. I tried to focus on breathing, keeping my movements smooth and controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My arms were beginning to ache from the strain, and I could feel a bead of sweat trickling down my forehead despite the cool morning air. The fish showed no signs of giving up, and neither did I. This was a test of endurance, and I was determined to see it through. I kept the rod tip up, just as Mike had instructed, and slowly, methodically, began to reel in whenever the fish paused in its fight. Each turn of the reel felt like a small victory, but the fish was far from defeated. It made another powerful run, stripping line from the reel, and I had to let it go, giving it the space to move without letting the line go slack. My breath came in short bursts, my focus narrowing to the thin line that connected me to the fish. Everything else faded into the background, the river, the trees, even Mike's presence beside me. It was just me and the fish, locked in a primal struggle. I could feel its strength, its determination to break free, and I respected it. This was no easy catch, this was a battle hard-earned. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn in my favor. The fish's runs became shorter, less powerful, and I could feel it beginning to tire. My own exhaustion was setting in too, but I knew I had to stay focused. This was the moment when mistakes could happen, when fatigue could lead to a snap of the line or a lost fish. I couldn't let that happen, not after coming this far. "Almost there, Jake. You're doing it." Mike's voice broke through my concentration, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this. I nodded, unable to speak, my eyes locked on the water where the fish was beginning to come into view. I could see its dark shape just below the surface, a flash of silver as it twisted and turned, trying to make one last escape. But it was running out of steam, and I knew it. The rod was bent nearly double under the strain, but I kept the pressure steady, reeling in slowly but surely. The final moments of the fight were the most intense. The fish made a last-ditch effort, thrashing wildly, but it was clear that it was losing the battle. I could see it now, close to the surface, its sleek body gleaming in the morning light. My heart was in my throat as I carefully guided it toward the shore, praying that the line would hold. Mike was ready with the net, crouched at the water's edge, his eyes never leaving the fish. After what felt like an eternity, the king salmon finally began to yield, its movements slower and less frantic. I could see its silver body shimmering beneath the water, a magnificent creature that had put up a tremendous fight. My arms were burning, my hands trembling from the effort, but I was determined to finish what I had started. The fish was so close now, just a few feet from the shore, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was it, the culmination of everything Mike had been teaching me, the moment when I would land my first fish. Mike was crouched by the water's edge, net in hand, ready to help me bring it in. "Nice and easy, Jake. You've got this," he said, his voice calm but filled with excitement. I nodded, barely able to process what was happening. My entire focus was on the fish, its sleek body cutting through the water as I carefully reeled it in. Every muscle in my body was tense, my mind racing with the possibility of something going wrong at the last second. But then, with one final effort, I guided the fish toward the shore, and Mike swooped in with the net. He scooped it up in one smooth motion, and suddenly, it was over. The fish was in the net, thrashing weakly but unable to escape. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, a wave of relief and exhilaration washing over me. I had done it. I had caught my first fish, and it was a king salmon, no less. Mike lifted the net out of the water, and I got my first close-up look at the fish. It was huge, easily over 20 pounds, with a sleek, muscular body and sharp teeth that glinted in the light. Its scales shimmered in shades of silver and green, and its tail flicked back and forth as it struggled in the net. I was in awe of the sheer size and power of it, and a sense of accomplishment flooded through me. This wasn't just any fish, this was a trophy, a testament to the battle we had just fought. "Jake, you did it. That's a beauty of a king salmon," Mike said, beaming with pride. He handed me the net, and I held it up, the weight of the fish heavy in my hands. I could hardly believe it, my first fishing trip, and I had landed a catch like this. The adrenaline was still pumping through me, my heart racing with excitement. This was a moment I would never forget. We took a few minutes to admire the fish, snapping photos to document the occasion. I could feel the pride swelling in my chest, the realization that I had actually done it, that all the effort, the learning, and the patience had paid off. Mike was as thrilled as I was, and I could see in his eyes that he knew this was just the beginning for me. After a few more photos, Mike showed me how to carefully remove the hook, explaining the importance of handling the fish gently if we decided to release it. But this one was coming home with us, my first catch, and a king salmon at that, was too good not to keep. We placed it in the cooler, packed with ice, and I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. This was more than just catching a fish, it was a rite of passage, an experience that connected me to something larger, something primal. As we cleaned up and prepared to head back to camp, I couldn't wipe the grin off my face. I had come out here not knowing what to expect, unsure if fishing was even for me, and now I was leaving with a sense of accomplishment that I hadn't felt in a long time. This was just the beginning. I knew I would be back out on the water again, ready for the next adventure. Back at camp, the atmosphere was one of quiet triumph. The king salmon lay on the cooler's ice, its silver scales catching the afternoon light. Mike and I couldn't stop grinning. It felt surreal, like a dream, but the ache in my arms and the cool, damp air reminded me that this was real. We had done it, my first fish, and it was a catch worthy of any angler's tale. Mike pulled out his phone and snapped a few more pictures, insisting we document every angle of the fish. "This is one for the books, Jake," he said, clapping me on the back. "Not every day you land a king like that on your first try." His pride in me was evident, and it made the moment even sweeter. This was more than just a fishing trip, it was a shared victory, a bond forged through the struggle of man versus nature. We decided to cook a portion of the salmon for lunch. Mike expertly filleted the fish, his knife gliding through the flesh with practiced ease. The meat was a rich, vibrant orange, and I could almost taste its freshness just by looking at it. "There's nothing better than fresh-caught salmon," Mike said as he placed the fillets on the portable grill. "This is going to be a meal to remember." The aroma of the cooking salmon filled the air, mingling with the scent of pine and the earthy smell of the river. We sat by the fire, watching the flames dance and sipping on cold beers from the cooler. It was a simple meal, grilled salmon with a squeeze of lemon, a side of grilled vegetables, but it was one of the best I'd ever had. The fish was tender and flaky, with a flavor that was rich and pure, untouched by anything but the river it had come from. As we ate, we talked about the morning's adventure, reliving every moment of the fight with the salmon. Mike shared more stories of his past fishing trips, each one filled with excitement, near misses, and the thrill of the catch. I could see now why he loved this so much, the connection to nature, the challenge, the camaraderie. It was about more than just catching fish, it was about the entire experience, the memories created, and the bond strengthened. The afternoon passed in a comfortable haze, the kind that only comes after a morning of hard work and a good meal. We lounged by the fire, talking and laughing, the weight of the morning's success still hanging in the air. It was a perfect day, one that felt timeless and almost magical in its simplicity. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the camp, I found myself reflecting on the day. I had come out here as a novice, unsure of what to expect, and I was leaving with a new passion, a new appreciation for the sport that Mike had been trying to share with me for years. This was just the beginning. I knew there would be many more fishing trips in the future, many more adventures to be had. Mike and I sat by the fire, the sky above us slowly darkening, the stars beginning to twinkle in the clear night sky. The river continued its gentle murmur, a constant, soothing presence that had been our companion throughout the day. We didn't need to say much, our shared experience was enough. We just sat there, enjoying the silence, the warmth of the fire, and the satisfaction of a day well spent. As the day drew to a close and the fire burned low, I found myself staring into the flames, lost in thought. The embers glowed softly, their warmth a comfort against the cool night air. The river's gentle murmur continued in the background, a constant, soothing sound that seemed to sync with the rhythm of my thoughts. I had come out here not knowing what to expect, and now, after a day filled with excitement, challenge, and triumph, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Catching that king salmon had been a thrill like no other, but it was more than just the catch that made the day special. It was the whole experience, the early morning start, the peacefulness of the river at dawn, the quiet moments of anticipation, and the sudden rush of adrenaline when the fish struck. It was the struggle, the fight to bring the salmon in, and the shared celebration afterward. Every moment had its place, and together they created something more than just a memory. They created a connection to the world around me and to a part of myself I hadn't known was there. Mike was right, there was something primal about fishing, something that spoke to a deeper part of the soul. It was about more than just catching fish. It was about the challenge, the patience, the connection to nature, and the quiet satisfaction that came from pitting yourself against something wild and untamed. It was about the camaraderie, the bond forged through shared experiences, and the stories that would be told and retold for years to come. As I sat by the fire, the stars twinkling above, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the day, for the experience, and for Mike's friendship. He had introduced me to something new, something I had never considered before, and in doing so, he had opened up a whole new world to me. I knew that this wouldn't be my last fishing trip. There would be many more mornings spent by the river, many more battles with fish, and many more moments of quiet reflection by the fire. The night wore on, and eventually, the fire began to die down, its flames reduced to glowing embers. Mike and I sat in companionable silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts, but connected by the shared experience of the day. There was no need for words, everything that needed to be said had been said through the day's events. We were both content, both satisfied with what we had achieved, and both looking forward to the next adventure. As I crawled into my tent that night, the sounds of the river lulling me to sleep, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. I had come out here not knowing what to expect, and I was leaving with something far more valuable than just a fish. I was leaving with a new passion, a new appreciation for the simple joys of life, and a new understanding of what it meant to truly connect with the world around me. This was just the beginning. There would be many more fishing trips, many more adventures, and many more moments of quiet reflection by the water. And each time I cast my line, I would remember this day, the day I caught my first fish, the day I discovered a new passion, and the day I truly understood the magic of fishing. This is where the story ends. Share your opinion in the comments. Did you like the story?